Ladies and gentlemen, I am Yusrul, the game is Star Trek Online, and welcome to the Tribble Timewarp. It is the 14th of April 2015, and we're going to be taking a look at some of the Iconian gear in the next couple of episodes. But first off, a little stop by the transport menu. You can see that it's been revamped. Gecko did say they were redoing this. The Excelsior fails are gone, so are the freighter fails. You have successfully evicted the Scotsman from your engine room before he could do any damage. Worth noting that they have changed some of the headings as well, so it's now Beta Quadrant, Delta Quadrant. Fleet Solid A Dyson Sphere, we don't have the direct systems names anymore. However, if you do left click on them, you now have these specific destinations, which seems... well, it's the same number of clicks because it's a single destination on each one. I'm just wondering if they're setting up here for more destinations in the Beta Quadrant, for example. Although, interesting, of course, you do have the direct jump to Deep Space Nine, which is Beta Quadrant, as well as the Azure sector. But, I don't know, it would seem simpler just to go straight to the radio buttons and the icons, even if they are going for a slightly cleaner look here. One thing that's worth noting, by the way, is that under Sphere Space, Solinae is misspelled Solinaire. Anyhow, we will quickly jump over to the... no, we won't, because I don't have a fleet. This is Tribble Timewarp. Let's see if this looks any different. Ooh, they've changed the deflector effect slightly. We didn't have those points before, and it then gives a warp effect. Camera zooms slightly, and then we reload, and it dumps us into the Sherman system right on schedule as before. Not sure what the point of rejigging the headings is, even if it's just to allow for future expansion later on without getting the menu completely disorganized at the top tier. But anyway, the shinies for the Iconian Resistance are in. While we're here, reputation. Just click that over there. The Iconian Resistance. Bear in mind, this is Tribble. Test server is test server. A lot of the artwork is missing, most notably the front page for the project. But we've got some of the traits. Energized nanites. 5% damage to C2, triggers up to 10 times per second. Oh wow. So basically that is a constant passive heal effect, more or less. I mean, the only way you could trigger more than 10 times a second is if you're using wide angle area effects, such as minigun cone attacks, orbital barrages, radiation effects, grenades, things like that, and really spamming them as well. Personal energy amplifier, your other one, kit-based skills deal 5% bonus damage. Frankly, that's lackluster compared to 5% outgoing damage as healing, but that's just me. Energy refrequencer, again, that's the space equivalent. 2.5% outgoing damage as hull heal. Again, oh boy, that could be interesting. A lot of emphasis on defensive skills for this one. 5% bonus exotic damage. Again, frankly, compared to its tier 2 counterpart, that feels lackluster, it has to be said, but we'll need to run this rep up and actually get these into play, give them a solid workout. This is just very much first impression stuff. Radiant Detonation Module. Okay, this is a ground ability, if I remember correctly. Weapons Fire has a 5% charge. Sorry, 5% chance. 5% charge? Well, you could put a 5% charge on some things, but I thought we'd abolished money. Anyway. 3,000 radiation damage in a 5-meter radius at target. Bear in mind that we're in space, so damage numbers are way off. Ganalda 4? What the hell am I doing here Ganalda 4? Oh wait, no, Drozana's a... Hang on. I jumped into Sherman, which is right the way over there. We haven't blundered that far along, have we? Okay, that's interesting. We'll come back to that one later on in the videos. Anyhow, back onto topic. Destabilizing phase screen. When damaged, gain immunity to further damage for 3 seconds. May only occur once every 60 seconds. So that is 5% immunity, effectively. But you'll basically get led with a... unknown nebula, that's what it is, crafting. You'll basically get led with 5% every minute or so. So it's an interesting take on effectively a 5% increase in hit points or 5% reduction in damage done. The fact that it's not under our control means it is basically going to be a random effect once the bullets start flying, but if you get a boss who leads with a very, very big attack, then meh, could be useful. Could be useful. Up into tier 4 we have the Radiant Detonation Matrix. 2.5% chance, 1000 radiation damage in a 1 km radius at target. Yeah, that's the space equivalent of the Radiant Detonation module. Worth noting, it benefits from exotic damage, so you could potentially get the 5% there and take that up to the whopping great 1020 radiation damage, and removes buffs. Well, let's face it, that's frankly more useful, particularly if we're going to be dealing with lots of swarms of enemies. The Iconians do have, sorry, the Heralds have a fighter type that could perhaps be evicted using that. Or you could just slap down a gravity well, get the benefit from exotic damage on that as well, and then just go ham on them, having stripped all their buffs. Doesn't make it clear whether it strips all buffs off the target or whether it just strips a few. It just says removes buffs. So again, that's something we're going to have to gear up and take. Destabilizing phase rate, the space equivalent of the destabilizing phase screen. Again, same comments apply. I am not convinced that that is anything other than effectively a 5% increase in durability. Powerful enough in its way, of course, but the sheer random nature of it does mean that we're going to have difficulties factoring it into any kind of predictable build. And finally, the topmost trait, deploy sensor interference platform, taunt and damage debuff, which redirects most weapons fire, then it reduces the enemy's damage to attack. So essentially this thing is running a permanent attack pattern delta on nearby targets, as far as I can tell. The platform gains 12,000 health for every allied targeting range, up to 5, and it lasts 45 seconds. So basically this is a pocket tank, as far as I can tell. Interestingly, of course, well, it doesn't specify the range, but we shall see. We also have, of course, the various Iconian Resistance gear. So, ground armor and shield array at tier 5. Anti-proton space... sorry, radiant anti-proton space cannon weapons, Mark 12, come in at tier 4 in the store. Warp cores and the advanced weapons as well. We'll have a look at those in a moment. Tier 3 gives us the ground options. Interestingly that there is only the one weapon. It's a pulse wave. This could be interesting. We haven't had one of those in a while. And some new options. Security kits, photonic overcharge, research kits, photonic overload, and photonic barrier generator. It'll be interesting to see how those vary compared to their usual options. Anti-proton assault ground weapons and pistols at tier 2 in the store. Deflector array and the quantum torpedo launch become available as well. Tier 1 gives you the radiant anti-proton rifles as well as the personal shield and the console. So enough mucking about, let's go have a look at the new toys. Right. Warping effects are missing. That is a known bug that's been mentioned. Also, interestingly, is that we have a Federation command cruiser on permanent station with Drozana. I can only assume these guys are either having the time of their lives or a holiday they'd really rather forget. But they're still here, so we'll go with option A. Let's just dock up at the station. Yoink. Again, transporter effects missing, known bug. Toddle, 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 toddle. And welcome to Drozana Station. Not the seediest place in the galaxy, that honour still goes to Hassan's old place on Nimbus 3, but really close. So what do we have? Anti-proton advanced radiant beam array. You know what, we'll just snag all of these. So we'll grab the Ordinance set first. Yoink, yoink. And then we'll grab the space sets. resistance sets as well. Okay, what do we also have? Okay, so Radiant Anti-Proton Space Weapons. You can see here we're getting a pretty consistent crit time 2 times plus damage. Crit D times 2 plus damage. We'll see. I mean, that's a pretty solid modifier in the current metagame, which is emphasizing crit D. And if I look at this correctly, times 2 plus damage, 24. Yep, that's incorporating the plus 20 for anti-protons as well, if I'm doing my numbers correctly. 20, 40, 50, yeah, plus. Actually, is it? 20 times 2, anti-proton, beams are only plus 50, cannons are plus 60. Also worth noting that the Radiant Quantum Torpedo Launcher they're using as a test bed doesn't have any options at all. So that's a little bit of a pig. A little awkward there. Not sure whether that's going to be a store error or not. I do not know. This is just something the devs give us to play with to test the props. On the ground, we have got the Radiant Blast weapons. Okay, 5% chance for some temporary hit points, as well as crit severity bonuses. Pretty much what we get. Looks like the Radiant option gives us that, and we also have, of course, Photonic Overload, Cone anti-proton damage perception, and damage debuff. Let's just grab one of those. Meanwhile, the barrier generators have a temporary hit point, 168.4 every 3 seconds, as well as some damage rating. Okay, it's actually a barrier generator. Okay, that's interesting. I might have to get an engineer in to test that out. Looks like a... I wonder if that's going to stack with medical generators. We'll come back to that one. And, of course, the Photonic Overcharge is actually a self-buff. 15% damage and 30% critical severity. So if you're loading up on high crit chance, that might definitely be worth a look. Meanwhile, there's not a lot here worth noting. Spectral bundles, for those who are interested. Also, rep inputs. Do kind of need an Iconian Resistance one there, but hey, bye-bye. Right, so where to start? I think we'll get into space first, because I need to pull an engineer character over to really take a good look at those other modules. Ditto a science character. Sorry, tactical character. You gods, I'm rambling. Let's just get into space, see what we have. Actually, you know what? Switch ship. Where did I leave my ambassador? Do I not have my... Yeah, we'll use the Guardian Cruiser for this one. Ready, Starship. Okay, and beam me up. Going to use the Starship for this one because it has a decent hull surface for us to have a look at the textures on if they're there. So, let's start with the basic texture. You'll note the Type 7. Drozana's lighting is a bit on the yellow side, but we've got the underside, which is better colour corrected, nearer to white light. Right, let's get started, shall we? So, first things first. The Ordinance set, the Sustained Radiant Field Mark 12. 15% hull healing, 10% all damage, 45% shielders. What's not to like? We will have that. I mean, that is remarkably effective, to be perfectly frank. Very definitely going for durability. It also explains why the Iconians were piling on so much damage during that run of Herald's Sphere. They, to a certain extent, seem to have had these sets in mind. Next things up, we'll have the Resilient Shield Ray, 6241, 5% absorption, 5% bleed through. That's standard resilient for Mark 12. Reduces all energy damage. Hot restart on shields. And removes 1 debuff every 10 seconds. There's not very much that chucks around a shield shutdown that I can recall. And what? I'm assuming this is incomplete, but Well, I get the circle motif, but I'm not so sure about the colour scheme. Also, it's changed the deflector over to kind of goldy colour, but let's just pull the Mako off, because that may be interfering. Yoink, have you? Lots and lots and lots of circles. I don't know whether it's the red that's clashing and coming up as transparent, but the first thing through my head is that this ship had an unfortunate encounter with a giant squid. I must admit, I like this circles within circles motif that's coming around the hull. I think it's the red that's giving me pause, and the fact that the circles are everywhere. Ugh. Also, it's changed the warp nacelle colours. Yeah, kind of like the almost yellow-white glow, almost sun-like glow that it's given the nacelles. But, yeah, mixed feelings about that one. It might grow on me, but it's nowhere near the oh wow effect that was the Aegis or the Mako sets. Oh well, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, as the saying goes. Right, next thing first, we'll load in the hyper-injection core, +5 engine power, +5 maximum engine power, standard hyper-injection stuff, 7.5% engine to shields, 17.5 core efficiency, hot restart, automatic... Oh, I regret coughing up from my Tholian set. Ha 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 ha! Oh wow, that's powerful. Hot restart on automatic weapon shutdowns. Ha 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 ha. Oh god. For those who aren't familiar with it, ladies and gentlemen, that was the 2 set on the Tholian shields, armor, and weapon set. And to be perfectly frank, they've just obsoleted that, because let's face it, if I can load that warp core and get the 2-set burst, I'm not going to bother using Tholian gear when all I have to do is get this for a cheaper price. So, yeah. Plus, of course, turbo healing while at full impulse. Well, that just guarantees you get to the next fight in one piece, which is never really an issue, because even if you dump active heals at the end of a fight, you can usually control that and get yourself to the engagement in one piece regardless. I suppose it's more a convenience thing than anything else. Right, so the impulse drives. 5% defense, nice. 90.8 flight speed, 0.23, that's fairly standard combat impulse. When at 100% throttle, 8.8 damage to this rate. Okay, that's going to tie into the pilotry, because there are several bonuses in that require you to be at 100% throttle. In fact, you know, let's just bring this up. Specializations, pilot. Scroll down. Now, if memory serves, taking damage applies temporary boost to shield hardness. Where was it? Desperate flight, that wasn't it. Reckless abandon, no. Eat my dust, no. Pack her off, nope. Although that wouldn't match anyway. No thrusters, nope. Come on, it was round here somewhere. Shield scraping, lone wolf. Here's a question for you. What happens if you mix lone wolf and a sensor interference platform? Impulse drafting. God damn, I knew it was here somewhere. Turn the other cheek. Maybe I was hallucinating it. Danger zone. Yeah. Could have sworn there was an ability here that required you to be at full... Ah, there we go. Pedal to the metal. That's the one. There we go. Maintaining full throttle for extended durations allows you to build up exit, blah 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 blah. Plus 2% damage bonus per second spent at full throttle. That's what I was remembering. So yeah, full throttle on this thing, and instead running your speed through your engine power, which is a novel way to approach speed control. Yeah, that's potentially plus 10% damage and plus 8.8 damage resistance. So hey, nice little side bonus there. Anyhow, let's get it loaded. And yoink. Okay, so that's in. Last but not least, we have the deflector, which looks like it's still using the Borg model. So remember, Tribble is Tribble, test servers, etc, etc. 17.5 kinetic resist, plus 5 shield power. Well, compared to the others, frankly, that's a little bit lackluster, isn't it? I mean, it's a solid enough defensive deflector, but compared to the hot restarts on the warp core and the shield grid, and the pretty interesting 100% throttle damage resist, then that's... yeah. Frankly, that feels like interesting that it's got plus 5 shield power on it, though. So, priority pieces are going to be the shields and the warp core, purely for the hot restarts. Engine power is nice, that's handy. Efficiency is always handy. The shield array isn't too shabby in and of itself. It's simply the hot restart and, to a lesser extent, the automated debuff removal that basically say, oh yeah, this is something worth having. Priorities though, warp core first, then shields, of course. The rep system may not see it that way. So, what do we get by way of set bonuses? Well, let's have a quick looky. Enhanced shield distribution. Distribute shields applies 303.3 shield generation 5 seconds to each facing. Once triggered, goes on to 30 second cooldown. That is a active ability by the looks of it. Energy augmentation, 5% passive, 15% all energy damage to all allies within 10 kilometers. Stacks up to 3 times. Wait a minute, what is this triggering on? Because if that's going to stack on a 5% chance, we'll try that. And the Radiant Subatomic Pulse to team. 33% all damage, 10% for like... okay, I think we might set some new speed records with that one. Have to get a buddy in to test it, but hey, you never know. Could have some interesting times there. Now then, just pick up the pulse as you go past it. It's a 30-second buff, so you could do it at the start of your run. Nice, controllable, and usable. Powers, let's see what we have, see if we can get any of these. Distribute shield power, evenly distribute shield strength. Now the question is, does that trigger? Yep, and it triggers when you go to use it by left clicking on the shield icon as well, so that's a nice touch. Only triggers every 30 seconds though, so you notice that repeated mashing is having no effect. Let's see what else we have. The Radiant Subatomic Pulse. Well, we can try that in a second. In fact, it's already loaded it. Interesting. Now, what's also interesting is that it's dropped it into my number 3 slot, which means that it was expecting the... Where is it? Where is it? The Energy Augmentation Actuator to kick in as a passive. Now, where's that? Reciprocity. I'm not sure this is kicked in at all. Energy, 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 energy. And indeed it hasn't. That doesn't appear to be functioning. There's no mention of it in the powers window. There's no mention of it in a buff. There's no triggering condition that I can see in the description. That presumably still needs to be put in. I'm wondering if it's a 5% chance on hit against an enemy, in which case a cruiser spamming beam fire at will is going to be a very interesting baseline for any ship nearby that cares to take advantage. Not even that nearby, actually. 10-kilometer radius. I mean, some careful piloting, you could take advantage of that. So, let's just try the pulse, shall we? So, let's have a quick look at this. This is 33% all damage, 20% maximum hull, and 10% flight speed for 30 seconds. Right, so let's see. We are doing flight speed 29.08. Forward disruptor array number 1 is doing 978.5 DPS, and we have got 78,000 hit points. Fire the pulse! Oh, that's kind of pretty. Okay, we have got 29.18 speed. Is this a team-only thing? 1046.3 DPS. No, we have got the buff in play. That's interesting. And hit points 89,019. So that is... yeah, that's approximately correct. That's the expected... what was it? Yeah, that's the expected 20%. Plus 10% flight speed. 20 29.08 compared to 29 point whatever it was. It wasn't a major increase. It certainly wasn't the 32 that you would have expected from plus 10% flight speed. And damage, similarly buffed. Again, I think it's done by buffing base damage rather than output, so... yeah. More or less working as the mechanics intended, I think, but the mechanics could be made clearer, particularly the link between flight speed here and your final speed down after all the engine power, maneuverability and pilot skills have been taken into effect. I think it's affecting base flight speed, not the final result. Anyhow, let's take a look at the Ordnance set while we're here, and then we'll wrap up this episode for the moment. So, Ordnance set consists of the beam array, the quantum torpedo, and the console. So, load them up, load in the anti-proton beam array as well. So, what do we get? We'll start with the torpedo. Quantum torpedo, 4,303 damage, 506.3 DPS. That is an 8-second cooldown, if I am doing my maths correctly, maybe a little longer. Standard quantum torpedo stuff, on hit 33% chance for 1,250 temporary hit points, can stack up to 5 times. 15 seconds, you're going to get your first shot at 0.0, your second shot at 8, your third shot at 15. So you should be able, just about, to get this up to 3 stacks without too much difficulty. Or rather, yeah, you should be able to stack this up. You should be able to raise it. It will, of course, take 40 seconds to come up to full power. What will be interesting to see is to get this into combat later on and see if the stacks refresh the running total or if it's cumulative. I have a suspicion that it'll do both, given the way it's phrased. 33% chance to chain to 2 additional targets with 5 points to do radiation damage. Again, should happen every, well, 15 seconds if you count your first shot as time 0. 20% chance to improve recharge time on powers by 5 seconds. That is very, very interesting. 20% accuracy and a, what I assume is a single crit D modifier. Not too shabby at all. Interestingly solid effect though. I mean, temporary hit points are a thing that Cryptic are pushing as a new mechanic with Delta Rising. We didn't see it quite so much before, but now with the improved attack patterns, the improved brace for impact, this torpedo, and, well, it started making its first real appearance with the Romulan singularity powers, didn't it? That was where most people first ran into temporary hit points. Anyhow, moving on to the anti-proton array. Pretty standard beam array stuff, so if I compare to a Mark 12 array from somewhere else, which I don't think I have. Actually, no, I do. Let's pull out the experimental Romulan array. So we've got side-by-side comparisons here. Notice neither of them are going to be taking benefits off the consoles for this one, so we should be on level ground. 673.8, 668.7. Spitting distance of each other, to be perfectly frank. I may have something passive that's boosting anti-proton, although I honestly couldn't tell you what, looking at this offhand. So, fairly standard beam array damage, power drain minus 10 compared to the, I believe it's either it's minus 10, so again, that's standard for beam arrays. Okay, so what do we get? Radiant hit points as before, 5% chance on a, since it's a beam weapon with a much faster fire rate, but bear in mind you start spamming beam fire. It will also bear in mind it fires 4 times per firing cycle. You're going to be much more likely to get this off your energy weapons than you are off your torpedo. Also worth noting the firing cycle haste on these weapons. Now I believe it's on the Radiant Anti-Proton cannon as well. Let's just pull this back. Anti-Proton cannon. Yes, there it is. 3% firing cycle haste for 6 seconds, maximum of 10 stacks. So long as you're firing every other firing cycle. Again, bear in mind your first shot is at time 0, your next shot will be at time 4, then your next shot will be a bit quicker. Yeah, as long as you can keep the weapon on target, you are going to essentially get a 30% haste on the weapon. Which is, well, let's face it, potentially that is very powerful. I would almost go as far as to say game-breakingly powerful, because you could happily trade a typical weapon modifier. Those are usually around 2.5 to 2.8% effective DPS, and that by comparison gets you plus 3 to plus 30% DPS if you can sustain your firing solution. So, well, hey, what's not to like? Plus 20 crit severity, plus 20% accuracy, which is what you'd expect for an anti-proton weapon. 1 accuracy, so basically 1 accuracy modifier, maybe 1 crit D modifier, maybe not. The radiant modifier, yeah, I'm thinking what we've got here is basically an anti-proton dual heavy with radiant for the hit point buff, haste, and accuracy as its mods. So, is this going to be more powerful than the traditional crit D? I have a suspicion it will be, honestly. Mostly because we'll have to see how this interacts with surgical strikes, but 30% haste, ladies and gentlemen. I think this question is, who boy? Anyhow, back on to topic. 10% crit severity, yeah, that's the difference between anti-proton beams and anti-proton dual heavy cannon. 20% accuracy. Again, we have got radiant, haste, and accuracy. The power drain on that, by the way, is coming off my plasmonic leech. So that's not built into the weapons. Don't get your hopes up there. That's not part of the package. Finally, of course, we have the console, the sustained radiant field. I mentioned before that this was basically a who boy what's not to like. Massive improvements to healing, both shields and hull. In fact, massive improvement to shield heals. Have I got, you know, let's load up a shield heal. See what kind of effect we get. So, transfer shield strength, transfer shield strength, transfer shield strength. Well, we'll load, yeah, there we go. Yoink. Okay, so we have got transfer shield strength 2. So with the console we're getting 840.3 initial, then 239.5 pulse. And if I pull out the console, yoink, status and inventory. Come on. Come on, close, thank you. No, close. Yeah, inventory fails, ladies and gentlemen. Then what do we get? 730.728.2. So yeah, that is basically, that's nowhere near 45%. Excuse me a second, I think they're going with base values again rather than power adjusted and skill adjusted. So 89.5. The problem is I can't take this out. I'd have to back figure the maths, and I really don't have the time, the patience, or for that matter the skill to do that. So let's just go back, double check. 730.7 to 8.2. And then we plug our console in. Ink. 840.3 to 239.5. That's more like an overall 10% increase. That's not 45%. What's it done to the hull heal? Okay, so 7507, that's 6528, so it should be 650. Yeah, that's about right. So it's adding about 10% correctly to hull heals, but it's not only adding again about 10% to shield heals, or at least to transfer shields too. Let's have a look at some of the others. Stations. What have I got? Science team's the obvious one. So, by default, 3,639.8, and Pull off the console. Yoink. Now we've got 3,165.1. So that should have been adding 45%. That should have been adding more like, what, 1,300 shield healing. It's only adding, yeah, again it's adding about 15%. There's some very odd interactions going on here. We can also take a look at hazard emitters as a hull heal, 15,405 over 15 seconds. Pull it off. Yoink. 13.3, so 10% of that would be 1,300, 14.6. Yeah, hull heals are getting 15% as advertised. It's the shield heals that don't seem to be getting the full benefit. They're certainly nowhere near as powerful as that 45% headline effect would have you believe. Yeah. Although that may just be a reflection of the fact that some of the mechanics in this game are a little bit opaque at times. Most notably the way it takes a base damage value, all the multipliers, and then rolls them all into a black box and comes out with a final number. Sometimes this game can be just a little bit arcane in its mechanics. Anyhow, let's take a look at the set bonuses, because it's an Ordinance set, there are shinies. So, 17.8 structure integrity, 25% hit point bonus to Radiant Anti-Proton and Radiant Quantum Break. Oh wow. Oh wow, okay. Also we have the Radiant Hypercharge, dealing extremely powerful blast. Excuse me a second. Let's just come back. Yeah, I'm also filming, so that will have to wait just for a sec. Excuse me. Well, that's flattering. That's kind of sweet of you. Thank you very much for the shout out. Ah, there you are, Knark. I'm actually almost done with this episode. Oh, yes, thank you. Accept. So yeah, where was it? Oh yes, set bonuses. So we had the Radiant Hypercharge that we needed to do a quick look at. Advanced Radiant Hypercharge. Okay, that's interesting. The blast wreaks havoc on weakened hulls, dealing more damage. Okay, so it's a finishing move. And if the target is below 50% max hull, you deal additional anti-proton damage. Can we get actual numbers for this? No, because... Oh, and it scales based on missing hull. It's a little lacking in... You know, let's just kick it up to weapon mode. Just the anti-proton beam array. Oh, wow! Deal up to 42,000 additional anti-proton damage. Damage increases at 30 degrees. Oh boy. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. That is beam overload on steroids, isn't it? Pity it's probably only the one shot. Oh well, 2-minute cooldown. I'm just going to quickly decline there. Haha! Oh wow, that is a very nasty combination. 2-minute cooldown, which is probably a good thing, or it will be entirely outrageous. And that's why we started stacking the good stuff, like all the damage bonuses and anti-proton consoles. I wonder if it applies to cannons. Can't test that. Oh well, we'll come back to that later on. I need to fit an escort up with anti-proton radiants and just go clubbing some Iconian seals with it. That will be fun. We'll do that later on, I think. But the key thing is this 2 power, because what I'm particularly interested in is the effect it had on the haste and the other options. Okay, so what do we have? Plus 1250 hit points. Okay, let's pull out both the beam array and the console. Remove the set bonuses for a moment. So, by default, we have got 33% chance for 1,000 hit points. That's why it was 1,250. We had the secondary bonus in and we weren't noticing. And 33% chance to chain to 2 additional targets. I will pull the torpedo off, because what's particularly interesting is if that extra 25% applies to the haste effect. And it doesn't. Right. Okay, so it's purely the radiant effect, it's not the haste effect, which makes me think that, yeah, we've got two separate special effects coming in on these radiant weapons. But, ladies and gentlemen, I have been rambling for a little over 40 minutes now. Thank you very much for your patience. That has been not quite as brief as I thought it would be. Look at the new space sets in Tribble. And until next time, farewell.